The Rosie and Bill Show wish to thank our partners and Positivity primary sponsors.
The Roselli Agency, based in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. Brian and his team of insurance professionals have been serving the needs of Chester County for more than 2 decades.
The Mallon Agency, located in Springfield, PA, where they take pride in tailoring the right insurance policy for the right client and exceeding expectations every time.
Welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show. Our guest this week was a child prodigy who recorded his first album at the age of 11. And the video you just saw was him at 12 years old. Please welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show, singer, songwriter, transcendent guitar player, and native of the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, Eric Steckel. Eric, so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's going to be great to talk to you guys today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, Eric, we've been looking forward to it. And one of the things that I was thinking about is as I watched more and more of your videos, and then I'd want to watch more and more of your videos.
That's cool. That's cool.
And I'm going to touch on a couple of them as we go. But
sure.
What is your first recollection of the first time you picked up a guitar? Do you remember what it was or what the circumstances were?
Yeah, so I was growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and my aunt, my dad's sister, she was an attorney up in Vermont, and they had a tradition of every July 4th, her and her husband Dave, my uncle, uncle not by blood, but who she married, they would come down every July 4th and spend time with my family at our house in Allentown, and my uncle Dave, I always knew he was a musician, but he played lots of instruments, and my parents did not play any instruments, but my dad had an incredible vinyl collection, still does. I'd actually love to know where that is because I'm sure it's worth a pretty penny. He had like first editions of, Van Halen 1, like just lots of Leonard Skinner first editions. So I'm sure that if he ever wanted to get that appraised, it would be probably tens of thousands, But anyways, so my parents, they didn't possess any particular musical abilities or skills, but they were major patrons of the arts, major music buffs. So I had that growing up in my house every day. But I always knew that every July 4th, my musically talented Uncle Dave would come down, and he would always bring some amps, guitars, and stuff. So that's what got me interested in the equipment, musical equipment. I thought that was so cool. When you're a little kid, like you don't understand, like, a guitar amplifier with these like tubes in the back that light up. Like when you're like 8 years old, you go, wow, this is cool. Sound comes out, so I was really fascinated by the equipment part of it because he would always bring his rig down. And then by the time I was about 9 or 10, on my birthday, he just saw that I was musically inclined. Now I hadn't really shown any, extreme talent at this point, but he just could sense that I was a music lover. So him and my dad, without me knowing, they went in together and they bought me my first American made Stratocaster guitar, Fender Strat, which was probably, I don't know with inflation, but back then that was still probably $1,000
Yeah.
gift.
Oh,
That was still probably at least 500, each for them. And it was an amazing thing. I'm like, 10-year-old kid, and I have this, beautifully handcrafted American, Stratocaster, which was the guitar that all my hero, Stevie Ray Vaughan and all the people I admired, and my uncle himself had one. So now him and I could now jam because now I had a guitar of my own. So like I said, every July 4th, for he would come down and we would jam, and he would show me a couple things. And basically, what I remember was he showed me one summer. He showed me like the basic pentatonic scale, which in music is like that's the scale that basically all rock and roll, all popular music is kind of based around that. He showed me that, and then that year, that summer, that year, I just like ran with that. And by the time he came back the next year to check on my progress, I was already better than him, actually. And I can say that because that was a joke within the family of like, wow, Dave, you got this kid to play, but now he's playing faster than you. So yeah, that's where it all began. And then it was such a roller coaster after that because within 2 years of that, I was playing professionally. I was playing in front of audiences, and yeah, it just spiraled from there, man. It's crazy.
Erica, I just have to just interject just for a second because I'm processing what you just
Sure,
said.
sure.
And so he showed you the pentatonic scale on the
Mhm.
guitar on that American made Strat,
Yep.
and then you did the rest.
Yeah. So yeah, because when you're a kid, it's weird. Like as adults, to think of that, it's really like it seems impossible and bizarre. When I look back, even though it was me, it's the same guy. At 32 years old, I say to myself, how would it be possible to like get all of that knowledge in your brain in 1 year? But here's what I have to remind myself is young kids. I mean, young kids we're like sponges. Like
Yeah.
young kid. Whenever a kid is bilingual or whatever, it's because they're they're 7, 8, 9 years old, and your brain at that age is just so much clearer. When you're an adult, you're worried about all this crap, bills and debt and just all this grown-up stuff that just takes away imagination, excitement, all these sort of realities of the world that just suck the energy out of you, right? But when you're a kid, you have no responsibilities other than maybe doing some homework assignment or something. So you're able to just sit there and just soak up things. And so that's how that happened is when you're a young kid, you have time, you have no stress, and that's the best time to learn. That's why all of the great talents, I think, athletes, musicians, actors, whatever, if you read their story, it's always the same story. It's always exactly the same, which is they were doing it as a child, and then they transitioned that into adulthood.
but I have to interject something, Eric, because it's one thing to have the time and have the inclination, but not everybody can move their fingers and do what you were able to do on the guitar at
Right.
that age so quickly. So I feel like there's you were born with an incredible amount of talent, and then you had the discipline and the wherewithal to really, you know, develop it.
Right. No, you're so right. I can never, downplay that and I actually when I do interviews, I want people to know that I've never tried to really take credit for it because I knew even back then, even before my brain was fully developed to the point where I could understand, bigger things. Even then, I could grasp that I was a bit of like a vessel. I could tell
Mm.
that the talent, the music, the thing was. I knew it wasn't just something I made with my bare hands. I knew there was something else at work. And these topics can get heavy. Everybody has what they believe in, what they don't believe in, whatever. That's none of my business. But I always believed, even then, that something was kind of working through me because when I would meet adult players, so I was, 9, 10, 11-year-old kid, but I would play in these, adult venues, right? I wasn't just playing in, like Chuck E. Cheese or something, I was playing in real venues and getting paid. So all the people that I was around, all the other musicians were at least in their 20s or 30s. Some were in their 60s, right? So I was around all these like grown up veteran musicians, and they all told me the same thing, which is, no, Eric, this is not normal. Because when you are the person doing something, it feels so normal to you. But so when I was 9 years old playing, like I get it now. When I watch the video, like the video you showed, when I watch that now as an adult, I go, "Oh, I get it. This is freaky." Like this is like if I would have walked into a venue and seen this, I would have been like, "Whoa." But when you're the one doing it, you don't think it's weird. You're like, "Why is everybody making a big deal? I'm just a kid playing guitar."
Right.
Because you don't understand how strange it is until you're a fully grown adult and you go, "Wow, there's this little 4'11" kid playing a full-size adult guitar and sounding like he's 50, but he's like 11." So I get it now. But when I was a kid, I'm telling you, I actually hated it. I hated that there was a novelty element to it. I didn't like that people were coming to watch the little kid play guitar, you know? But now I fully appreciate that because that's why
You
I have a career.
understand why. Yeah, you understand why now, because it's not, there are many people much older than you that will never get to the level that you're
Right.
at.
Sure.
You know,
Right.
but I love that you have that perspective of the appreciation for the gift and the inspiration that does flow through you. And you know, that's just amazing. And I want to bring it back to that video that we saw when you were 12.
Yeah.
Now, you were invited by John Mayall, blues legend,
Yep.
to tour with him. How did that, first of all, come about? And how did that experience impact you and kind of change the course of your life?
Yeah, so basically, so what was going on? So as you mentioned, I'm from the Lehigh Valley. So I got, my dad. I always, my dad's not in the music business in any capacity. My dad's been in, mortgages, financing, banks, lending, whatever, for years. But I always tell him that I said, you would have been a great booking agent in another life because he was so good at getting me. I was playing all over the Lehigh Valley to the point where like I was basically in the you remember the Morning Call newspaper that was there, so I was in that paper like every weekend because I was playing in every place that had live music. My dad really was a great. He was a great artist. He was a great agent, actually. He was great at that because I was constantly booked. I was playing all the places that every other artist would play. So I became kind of like, locally famous as like, oh, this is that kid that plays in Philly and Allentown, Bethlehem. So for a couple years there, it got so big to the point where anywhere I would go and play, the word got out, about wow, this little kid, so there would be hundreds of people like every time I played, and I became kind of like the local, the hero, local hero, right? So, and I was totally content with that. I didn't, I was so young that my brain wasn't, I wasn't thinking really about money or ego, like the things that as an adult you think about, like your ego and fame and money and how successful. That was like totally not on a 12-year-old's mind. You just want to have fun and play and just, and play the best you can. So I had been doing that for years and years, and then I was playing this gig. It was like, so there's this theme park in Allentown called Dorney Park. I'm not even sure, is it still there? I don't know, but it was like a little sort of poor man's Disney, some kind of thing, or like a Six Flags kind of thing, but like half-assed, right? So across the street was, I think it was, I don't know, if it was a Comfort Inn or a Holiday Inn, some hotel chain that had a little restaurant and a small stage. And bands, local bands would play this gig. It didn't pay much, probably a couple $100, but what happened was I started doing like a residency at this thing. So it was like every Thursday I would go play this Holiday Inn or whatever the hotel was across from Dorney Park. So I'm playing it week after week. It's the same old crowd, same thing. But one week, this guy shows up to the gig, and kind of a gruff looking guy, older guy, long beard, whatever. And he went over to my dad and said, "Hey, I have this good friend. She promotes a festival in Sarasota, Florida, and her name's Barbara. And And he goes, yeah, we're friends online and whatever. And he goes, her festival has this theme where every year the opening spot at 12 noon is always like a young talent, under 20 years old, somebody who's, the next generation. And he said, Eric would be perfect for that. And my dad being, kind of a practical guy, a numbers business guy, he was like, well, so we're gonna drive or fly to Florida to play some $300 opening slot, and the guy said, listen, it's not about the money, just do it for exposure, do it for Eric's ability to meet some other people and play in a different state. So we ended up taking the gig, and I think we actually drove because we had equipment or something. So we drove as a family from Allentown to Sarasota, Florida, and I opened the festival. I think it was like 12 noon. And basically, this is what happened. John Mayall was the headliner that night at 11 p.m. or something. So I certainly didn't expect to see him or meet him all day because I'm at 12 noon, he's at 11 p.m. As we all know, most artists don't arrive maybe a half an hour before, at the most an hour before they go on. So I was expecting to not even run into him. But, just my luck, right at the tail end of my set, which was only 45 minutes, so probably 12:30 or so p.m., his tour bus pulls in behind the stage. And it was because he had to pick up some, I don't know if it was, maybe hotel keys or credentials, something that he had to pick up early at the festival. So he gets out of his bus. Now, he's behind the stage, okay? So he can't see who's playing, but he can hear the music, okay? So he gets out of his bus, hears me playing. The story that I'm told is that he says to his guys, hey, give me a few minutes. I'm going to go check out this band. They sound pretty good. So he walks around to the front of the stage, and there's a little kid up there. He didn't know it was a kid, because it's my guitar playing sounded grown up. So he's there in front of the stage, just like looking at this little kid, going, "Holy crap! I can't believe I'm hearing this coming out of this kid." So I'm still on stage. I'm still playing. He runs backstage and says to the promoter, Barbara, he says, "Hey, is this kid's father here?" And she says, "Yeah, I'll take you to meet him." And like I said, this is all happening while I'm playing, so I don't know anything that's going on. So, long story short, while I'm still on stage, John introduces himself to my father, says, I am absolutely going to bring your son on the road. John said, I have a reputation for finding, great guitar players, which he does, because for folks who don't know John, everybody's come through his band. Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Peter Green. It's just like this basic training boot camp of, you want to be a guitar player, you got to go through John, right? So my dad, having the great vinyl collection and knowing blues history, knew that John was not telling a lie. This is what John's known for. So he says, I'm taking your son on the road. Give me a few weeks to set it up. You're going to see an email in your inbox with a flight ticket, in the next 2-3 weeks. And my dad goes, wow, thanks, that's great. So we go back to Pennsylvania, and my dad sat me down and said, now, Eric, the music business, it's a tough business. Don't be offended if it doesn't actually happen. Because at this point, every charlatan and every snake had come out of the water or the grass at this point and promised to get me on Ellen or Letterman, or everybody had promised me and my family millions of dollars and huge success, and of course none of that happened. So my dad was preparing me for, it could be another one of these where John, he means well, but it just isn't going to happen. So I just go back to school, like a regular kid. I'm playing basketball, I'm hanging out with my friends. I think I was at Salisbury Middle School at this time. And 3 weeks passes, and my dad gets an email from John with 3 first-class tickets to Stockholm, Sweden, which was the first date of the tour. And so it was real. And so yeah, me and my family. I'm 12 years old. We we pack our bags, and we get on a plane and we fly to Sweden to meet John on the first date of the tour. And then we traveled by tour bus for the whole rest of the tour, which was, all over Europe. And yeah. And
Well, wait a minute. Did your
yeah.
parents stay with you?
Yeah. So John, I think John, John was a parent as well. And he actually had a son that was about my age at that time. So I think he looked at it and he went, look, I want this to be legitimate. I want this to be on the up and up. I want this kid's family to respect me as Eric's mentor, a band leader. So I think in his mind he thought, well, if I only fly the kid over, his parents might be a little concerned about maybe what's going on over here. Is somebody watching after him? So he bought them 2 first-class tickets as well. So my parents were on the tour, in the tour bus with John and his band. And it's bizarre. I actually found recently, some behind the scenes video of like my mom sitting there talking with John about like what kind of floss they like or something. Like it's so bizarre. Like it's bizarre. So yeah, my family was on that tour. My whole family came on that tour. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Again, it's like where do you go from there? That is amazing stuff. And
yeah,
it's
wait, Bill, I have to interrupt you because Bill and I, when I watch this video back, are sitting here like this, Eric.
Yeah.
Well, and there's one other thing that I wanted to just ask you about as well. And you actually mentioned Stevie Ray Vaughan earlier, and I saw, now this was just kind of something that I sensed or saw as you were playing, the way you were hitting the chords, your wrist, your fingers. I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan in your hand movements.
Yeah,
it looks so much like the way he would play.
Sure.
And then I went to one of your other videos where you did something I didn't know anybody would have the courage to do. You played Scuttlebutt and Mary Had a Little Lamb and nailed it. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's from another era, man. So basically for me, the first years of my playing and making records and stuff, whenever I listen to that older stuff or it comes on in the car, in shuffle or whatever, so I can hear so clearly that I was my influences. I was wearing them on my sleeve so openly, so obviously, and so proudly. And what's funny is, as I got older and as my own sound developed, and as my ears evolved, my taste evolved, you hear less of the obvious copying of your influences and more of the person himself. More of my feelings, my thoughts, whatever. But yeah, in those early days. And it's not a bad thing. It's when you're starting out, you have to learn from somewhere. You have to get inspiration and get material from somewhere. So yeah, those first few records that I did when I was in my early teens, it's heavily a Stevie Ray Vaughan attempt or copy in a way, with a little tinge of when I hear those early albums, I can hear little signs of what I would become later as a player, but largely in those days it was me paying tribute to the players that I got all the licks from and stole everything from. And that's the way it is for everybody. Every artist if you listen to the early part of their career, they're pretty derivative. You can hear that they're taking this from somewhere else that's you can easily trace the lineage. But you know what I'm proud about now, the thing I'm the most proud about now is that after 25 years of playing, I'm finally at a point where people are starting to copy me, you know, and I hear people, you know, I'll see videos on YouTube where somebody will say, oh, they'll break down like an Eric Steckel lick or something like that, and that really, I really love that, because that makes me feel good that after all those years of copying everyone else and worshiping my heroes, finally now I'm getting to a point in the last couple of years where I'm starting to have a sound that people are trying to emulate. So that's like, for me, that's everything. That's like an honor, you know?
Definitely. And you know, it's funny you said that, because I have also heard that all great artists study the great artists.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it's also funny because influences change. You know, if I was doing this interview with you guys 10 years ago, my list would have probably been Stevie Ray Vaughan, Albert King, you know, it would have been very traditional blues. And now my inspirations are, it's a whole different list. Now I would probably say Gary Moore, Eddie Van Halen, Rory Gallagher, Dan Huff. You know, it's just funny how the list changes and your ears change and your taste changes. And also the way I play now and my sound and the type of equipment I use, the way I approach it, 12-year-old me would have hated me. Like I would have never gone to see me the way I play now back then, because I was such a purist. I was like, when I was younger, if it wasn't blues, and if the guitar had any distortion on it at all, I was like, get it away from me. And now, ironically, my sound, I call it blues metal actually, because my sound is just so heavy and so much more powerful than than back then. So yeah.
There's definitely a huge, well, first of all, I love blues, and I love that aspect of your playing and your band. And we spoke earlier, we have a mutual friend in your band, John Platero, who's extremely talented. And when I came to see you guys live at the Sellersville Theater, you know, John said, Eric has me doing all these trash can endings.
Yeah.
And there is that, you know, that power and that hard edge to it, you know,
Yes.
and boy, you guys really jam up there.
It's funny, John and I, we joke about it all the time, you know, like he's like, Eric, you know, you're the only guy, you're the only bluesy type player that wants me to play more double bass. You know, he said a lot of the blues guys I play with, if I even do one double bass roll, it's like blasphemous to those guys, sacrilege to those guys. And he said, you're the opposite. Yeah, I mean, my approach to my music now is like, yeah, it's a lot heavier, a lot more modern, a lot more mature, but yet there is that blues root that's always there. It's just, you know, that basic ingredient in the recipe is still there. So
But you
yeah.
also play the piano quite well,
Yeah.
and there's the blues influence in there.
Yeah.
How did you get so good on both of these instruments?
Yeah, the piano thing is really bizarre. So piano was actually, a lot of people don't know, the piano was my first instrument, but not really, like, okay, it's hard to explain. So like when I came up in the Lehigh Valley as the guitar, you know, the little mini guitar hero, everybody just thought, well, oh, since he's so young, this must have been his first instrument. But I actually had like traditional piano lessons that every kid gets, you know. I had that as far back as like 6, 7 years old, before I even had a guitar. But it never went anywhere, and I actually hated it because, like, I just didn't, classical music and reading charts and sitting up straight and like that to me is like not, the fact that that's music and what I do now is also called music, that makes no sense to me. Like those two are like totally different, you know, polar opposites, right? So the piano lesson thing just it just dissolved. It just at a certain point my parents realized like this is not, you know, he's not digging this. So then I went on to, you know, I don't know, playing baseball or whatever. You know, kids go through all these different phases, right? So that was a little mini phase that kind of dissolved. So then what happened was, fast forward way forward to like 2007, and you know, at this point I had already, done the John Mayall stuff. At this point I was pretty established on the blues scene as a guitar player, and I was 17 years old. So I'm making this album. The album that I put out that year, it's called Feels Like Home, and I'm making the album. And if I can remember correctly, I wanted there to be a lot of Hammond organ and piano, a lot of keyboards on the record, because the songs just, the material that I had written at that time lended itself to having a lot of keyboards. And I'm sitting there going, okay, who am I going to hire for this? Because I had very specific sound in mind. And I'm like going through sort of like my Rolodex of musicians I know, and I'm like, I don't think, not this guy. Oh, this guy, no, maybe not. So I'm like, I'm having trouble finding the person that I want to do that job. So at a certain point, I just sat down at the piano. My family had a little music room in the house with like a digital piano in there. So I just sat down with my guitar in my lap at the piano bench, and I just started transposing everything I know here, putting it onto the piano, right? So sort of like reteaching myself the piano, but throwing out all the old piano lesson stuff, like not reading, no paper, not reading any sheet music, just taking the knowledge I have of the fretboard and applying it to the keyboard. So about 6 months of that, I'm starting to play some pretty decent, blues piano licks, right? So I said, you know what? I'm going to try to do all the keyboards on this album myself. And I knew it was a daring thing because, first of all, I'm known as a guitar player, so now I'm going to be playing two instruments on a record. Okay, let's see. And when I told the producer this, he was a little, because he hadn't heard me play any keyboard yet, so he's a little like, oh, you're going to play. Okay. So I remember actually vividly the moment I had this song called Southern Skyline, I think, and there was a little section for a keyboard solo, and the producer had never heard me play any keys before, and I said, well, let me take a solo in this one. So I'm sitting, and he presses record, and I did it, and that's the one that made the album, and that gave me the confidence, the fact that it went well, it gave me the confidence to do that and play all the keyboard parts on that record. So now, fast forward to all the way to the present, ever since then, I've done all the instruments on my albums except for drums.
Wow. Eric, do you have time for a social life at all?
Interesting question. Yes and no. So, okay, so here's the best way I can answer this. I love the road so much, and I love touring so much, and I love the people that I tour with, because I have all these different bands all over the world. Like, it's always Eric Steckel. Like, it's always me doing
Right.
my songs. So what I mean by bands is I mean like, drums and bass. So I have all these musicians all over the world. I'm personal friends with all these people that I play with. So so for me, going out on the road with them and the adventure of the road, the laughs, the stories, the moment, the surreal moments that you have, that actually has become my social life. Because so when I first started doing this, when I was a young kid, especially a teenage kid, everybody that I was working with was so much older than me that there was really no social aspect to it, because I had my friends at school who were my age, and we would, ride bikes together in the neighborhood, play football together, whatever. And then I would go do I'd have this other life with these older adults, and there was not a lot of, the only common thread was the music, and the talent was the common denominator. But whatever was going on in my life was not the same as some 50-year-old guy who's divorced or something, right? There's nothing there to really tie a 13-year-old kid with a 50-year-old guy, right? So, but now that I'm older, and the people I'm playing with are my age or somewhat, or whatever. So now there is actually a level of bonding and friendship and adventure. And like just last night, I was on Skype with my European bass player talking about, we're going out in a few weeks for a big Europe tour again. And we were actually just talking about this, how much we're looking forward just to being back on the road together and in the van, and the stories, the laughs, and the adventure, and you know, making fun of all the knucklehead sound guys we run into, and all the weird people. You know, I'll tell you guys something. Sometimes just stopping at a gas station with your whole band, sometimes in a foreign country, sometimes that alone is just so much fun, because you're just these like pirates on this adventure, and none of the rules of society apply to you. You're out there with your guys. You got your instruments. You're in some big Sprinter van, and you're speaking English, you know, and everybody else is doing whatever. So yeah, sometimes the social aspect of touring is actually what I look forward to most these days that I'm a little bit older, you know.
Yeah, now, Eric, I had one last question for you. You just talked about the European tour that's going to be happening in the next few weeks. Any new music or any projects, anything else you might have on the horizon?
It's going to be probably the busiest touring year ever for me, of my whole career. It's going to be, so like I said, so May 1st I fly to Frankfurt, and we start this first run. The first leg is May through the middle of June, and it's like Switzerland, Belgium, UK, Netherlands, Spain. I'm probably forgetting a few there. And then I come back from that tour. I come back to LA for 3 weeks just to catch my breath. Then I fly back overseas. I go do a big festival in Poland. We're headlining the biggest blues festival in the whole country of Poland. And then 2 days later, we're playing the biggest festival in the Netherlands. It's called Bospop. And that day we're on the bill with Billy Gibbons, Joe Bonamassa, a lot of big names that day we're on the bill with. So that's going to be a great festival. And then that month I'm doing more stuff. I'm doing like Austria, Germany. It's insane. So this year coming up is going to be just absolute non-stop touring. So financially, it's going to be, you know, wonderful year. But your question was about new projects, new music, and the answer is, because there's so much touring this year, it's going to push that back a little bit.
Well, you certainly have the talent to be absolutely huge, Eric, and we're
Thank you.
so glad that you came and talked to us, and we wish you all the best.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And it's cool to talk to somebody with a 610 phone number. That brought back a lot of memories, just seeing that written, you know.
I just want to let you know, next time you're anywhere in the area, whether it's Sellersville again or whatever, this time I'm going to join my partner and come out and check you out. I look forward to seeing you. And in the
Excellent.
meantime, we thank you again for joining us. We wish you all the best, and I can't wait to see you play live.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, hopefully we get back to the Northeast as soon as possible. This year would be great if possible, but worst case, early next year. So we'll see.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. And folks, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.